Hi guys, in this video we're going to make Chip from Chip and Dale. I think it's Chip, I get the two confused. I'm going to use a 6-inch cake drum and some modelling paste. In fact it's a 5-inch cake drum, not 6-inch, sorry. Now I've dyed my modelling paste in a caramel ivory colour and I'm rolling it out but keeping it quite thick, and I'm just giving my little cake drum, I'm just giving it a bit of water, and we're just going to press this around, making sure there's plenty of water to stick it on. You can use edible glue if you prefer. So give it a good firm press. I'm just rolling it against my little work surface. And I'm just trimming off that bottom edge, because obviously the underside you're not going to see. It just means I can place it easily on the top of a cake and take it off easily if I've got the board on. And it means I'm not using as much modelling paste as I would if I made it solid icing. So just using a knife, we're going to put in little lines so it looks like the top of a piece of wood. So this is going to be the base that they stand on. So lines going from the outside edge towards the centre, and then lines coming around, creating almost circles then. So around the edge now, we're just using the modelling tool. I'm just using the pointy end of like my Dresden tool. You can still use the knife if you want for this bit, whichever you find easier. Just do that all the way around, and I'm just using the knife again to put in some deeper slits and cuts of opening up some of those lines. Then we're using a dry brush to add on some colour. So keep it deeper around the outside edge. Don't put too much in the middle because you want it to be nice and light in the middle. I'll put links in the description box below the video to these colours that I'm using, so to these edible dusts and to anything else that I use in the video. And then I've got some chestnut colour food colouring, which I've just mixed with water for this. And I'm just going to paint it on that very outside edge. So I've gone all the way around the edge, keeping it a bit deeper in some points. So can you see I've gone slightly into those deeper cuts, and I've managed to smudge some paint as well on there, so we'll just rub that in so it looks like it's part of the patterning. And now I've got a bit of a chestnut mixed with a bit of a dark brown, and again just modelling paste. I've just got the Renshaws modelling paste here and dyed it to the colour. So we're going to create a body. So mould it first of all into an oval, and then kind of pinch it in around the middle of the oval so it's got a little bit of a slimmer waist. And then I've got a tiny bit of that caramel ivory colour now that I've dyed. Roll that out into a strip, and we'll put this over his front for his paler colour tummy. So give that a good push on, make sure it's stuck down in place. So now make a teardrop shape, keeping it quite chunky of the pale sort of ivory colour, and we'll just put some little lines in there. And this is going to be his chest piece of hair. I've got a little bit of water on the back of that, and we're going to push that onto the top of the body. And I'm just going to make a slightly smaller one now that just goes over the top of that. A few more lines in, and again just push that on there. So giving him quite a large bit of fur on his chest. So I'm making some of my brown a little bit darker still. Just make sure you've still got plenty of the brown that you've used for his body that's left for his head and his arms. And then I've deepened a little bit of it ready for his jacket, and we've rolled it into a long strip, and I'm just marking on the length I want it to be. So I'll trim it so it's the right width or the right height. And then I'm going to mark whereabouts I want it to come to again, so that it wraps round to the right place. So it's just going to come round to either side of the pale bit of his body. And then taking a little bit more brown. Now I've added a bit of white to this, so it's a slightly different colour from the jacket. We're going to cut a long thin strip, and you're just going to add that underneath the bottom of his jacket. And then just put some little lines in. I'm just using the knife, but you can use the modelling tool. And this is slightly lighter than the caramel ivory colour that I've used for his chest. I've added a bit of white. And we're basically rolling some little, almost triangle shapes, which will be the fur trim of his little jacket. So you're going to push those on in place, just on the edge of that jacket, and then texture it a little bit by adding little lines so it looks a bit more fur-like. Now, it's just a little bit tall, so I'm going to just trim a little bit off the bottom and make sure that he stands up without falling over. So now for his feet, I've rolled an oval of the brown. So this is the brown we used for the body, and I've just cut them in half lengthways. And now I want 2 balls, which will be the legs. Just make sure they're both the same size or similar, and these will stick on either side of the body, or the bottom of the body I should say. So just give them a good push on in place. And then back to the feet, and just putting a couple of little lines in the end of each foot for his toes, and then push those into the front of the legs that you've added. So you might find they move around a little bit until they've had a chance to set. And now for the little tail, go back to your caramel ivory colour, the pale one. Create a teardrop shape, and then add a couple of little lines into it so it looks a bit more like hair. And we're going to put a thin piece of black just down the centre, and you can stick that onto the back of him. So back to the jacket colour, we're going to make a little arm. So roll a little sausage shape and bend in half. And then we can put a couple of crease lines in where the elbow would be. Now, check it for size. If it's a bit chunky, we're going to slice a little bit off the inside of that arm so it fits a little bit tighter to him. So just put that on there like that. And I'm going to bring it up so that his hands sort of hold the edge of his jacket. So I'm just pushing that end of the arm on there so it sticks in place. And that bit we've just pushed down we'll cover with the hand anyway. So for the hand, we want a little circle of the brown. And I've just pushed a little dint in to kind of create a thumb. And just stick that on the end of that sleeve that we've added. And then a tiny, tiny piece of brown now can be rolled to put around the very edge. So it's just going to neaten up where the hand joins the arm there. And just do exactly the same with the other arm. And then we're going to move on to his head. So taking some more brown, so the same colour you've used for the body, start with a circle and then we want to narrow the top of the head and sort of pull out where his cheeks would be. And I'm just gently pushing in where I would want his eyes to go. And just in a little bit at the tops of the cheeks as well. And I was just trying to work out the best way to get the right shape. So I decided to use a heart cutter. You don't really need to use a heart cutter for this. You can just roll 2 shapes freehand if you like. So more of the caramel ivory colour. So almost like a sausage shape that I've squashed a little bit to stick over the face, which will become like his mouth and cheeks. Now it's difficult to tell sizing wise, but I decided I'd done it a bit big afterwards. So I'm just going to try and put in some little fur marks around the edge of his cheek, just using my little modelling tool. And I've just pushed a slight dint in where I want his nose to go. And then just giving the eye sockets a bit of a rub to make sure that they're evenly spaced. And I've added a little bit more white now to the ivory so that it's just a tiny bit paler for the nose. And create almost a little lemon shape is probably the best way to describe it for the nose piece. Push that on. And then we're just going to shape it a little bit with our modelling tool. So you're kind of creating a little dint partway down that's curling up round to the corner of his mouth. And that's going to create sort of a top jaw and a bottom jaw. And then from the outside corner, push in with your modelling tool so it just looks like sort of the edge of his smile curled up. And we've got some white modelling paste for the eyes. Just keep it nice and thin. And I've got an oval shaped cutter that I've used for these. And I've just trimmed the bottom off each oval. And stick those in place. Again, I've just used water, but you can use edible glue if you prefer. Just give them a good push in, make sure that they're in there nice and tight. So I'm going to paint the details onto his eyes. I've just got black food colouring and a nice thin paintbrush. And I'm doing an outside edge around the eye, so keeping it slightly thicker at the top and bringing it round thinner as you come down. And then you want a black circle in each bit. Now the white bits are just where I haven't painted, so try and leave a tiny white circle. And then we're just indenting just under his chin a little bit. And then a black oval shape now for the nose. And again, just similar to what we did with the cream bit on his cheeks. We're sort of putting in little slits to create almost like little fur marks on his cheeks. Now, he's got a hat, so I'm going to slice off some of his head so that the hat sits a little bit nicer. So I've done it to an angle so that his hat will go on at an angle. And to make sure he's nice and secure, I've used a cocktail stick to put his head on in place like that. If you want him to be fully edible, you can use spaghetti, but because it's modelling paste, it will set really hard, so I wouldn't advise eating him anyway. So just neatening up anywhere where there's a little gap. So I'm just trying to push the fur from his jacket under his chin. Now, for the hat, I've dyed like a khaki colour, and I've got food colouring that is actually called khaki. Roll it out nice and thin, and you're going to cut a circle from that, and that's going to be stuck onto that flat area of his head, so the bit that we've just cut off his head, like that. And now take a ball of the khaki. Roll it between your fingers. It's a bit big as it is, so I'm going to trim it down. So can you see I'm pressing with the top and bottom of my finger and sort of rolling it between my other fingers? Just check size that it fits, and then we're going to push that in place in the middle of his hat. And to neaten it off, we're going to put a brown thin strip of icing just around that top edge. So put some water on in place where it's going to go, and we'll wrap that round, and then we'll trim that off at the back, like that. And now we just need to give him some ears. For the ears, I've got more of the brown that I've got left from the body. And I've rolled a little, I don't really know what shape to call it, almost a sausage shape with a point at each end. And then I'm going to put the creamy colour that we've got in the centre, cut that in half, and we're going to stick these on for ears. So just sort of stick them at the back of his hat so that you can just see them kind of peeking out on either side. There he is. And then you can just attach him then to the little tree stump that we made earlier. Again, I'm just using water. You might want to use something stronger if you haven't got long to let it dry. Now Now, rather than putting him in the middle, I've put him to the side just so that I can add Dale if I've got them both the right way around. So you can see I've started Dale here. Now, I haven't filmed Dale, so I'm going to leave that one up to you guys to make yourself. But there's a picture of them finished. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video and would like to see more, please click on the images of the other videos suggested. Also, please do subscribe to my channel using the button at the bottom right hand corner of the screen. You can also visit my cake website and my Facebook page to see more cakes and ideas.